Welcome to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Coopersmith, a doctorate prepared nurse practitioner, and this show is about empowering you to live a radiant, healthy, and balanced life. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, Arnon Krongrad, a Columbia-trained surgeon, medical researcher, and founder of ES, a fast-growing knowledge community built around maximal health with minimum noise. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me.
So, what inspired you to develop the health knowledge community?
I don't know that I felt inspiration. It just kind of sucked me in. I was not aware what was happening to me. It's that feeling like you're a cork floating on the river of life. It
Oh,
was more like that.
it
Uh,
found you?
yeah, I'm technically the founder of ES,
Yes.
but it's more like ES is the founder of me. I mean, it changed me.
Ah. So, what is ES?
ES today is a knowledge sharing club devoted to maximum health with minimal noise. It's for intellectually curious men and women who are in their nature skeptical. They're not likely to believe everything they hear online. They have their questions and they want them answered. At the same time, they're not looking to spend their weekends at biohacking conventions. They're not looking to exhaust themselves. And here's the problem. When you go online, you find dubious information, if I'm to be polite about it.
Right.
And what's being offered is what I said, it's exhausting. So they want what I think is very reasonable. They just want to be healthy.
Uh, do you feel like they need help sorting through all that noise?
I think we all do.
Yeah.
I do. And I have way more experience than any of my members, and arguably more than almost anybody, in dealing with biology as applied to humans,
Mhm.
right? So I've been at the bedside 60 years. I joined my first house call when I was 6 years old. I've been at this from various perspectives, been there, done that, done lots of things in my career, and I'm struggling to try to figure it out.
Right.
So there's an implied fundamental question weaving throughout all of this, and that question is health complicated or is health simple? You can take either approach. If you want to know all about mitochondrial membranes and every signaling pathway, it's very complicated. It's
Mhm.
infinite. There's no way you're going to learn it all, and you can take every ounce of energy and every minute of your day trying to figure it out. It's very complex. I take the opposite approach. As fascinated as I am by all the science of it, I mean, I've produced some of it myself. I've done molecular biology, so I speak that language. But as a human being, I'm not looking for that complexity. I'm looking for simplicity. I want simple rules. And what ES does is it tries to weave in the nuances.
Yeah. I think, like your listeners, I think we should be skeptical because there's, when we talk about headlines and things out there and research, and I put my fingers in quotes up here, research, and, as those of us who have been through different training, we've been kind of trained to recognize different things in research. But most people who don't have those types of degrees, they really can't see that or see what research is valid and what's not. So does your program kind of help with that?
It does, but I would broaden the problem. It's not only people who have no formal training, right? I've got single moms working in hotels. I mean, they people who don't have any kind of professional training. But the problem is for all of us. I have the same problem. I do speak that language. I've delivered babies. I've done surgery. I've cloned a gene. I've done clinical trials.
Mhm.
It's overwhelming. So do we deal with it? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, we try to make it as actionable as possible through a variety of mechanisms. The way we pass on the information, but we try to make it actionable. Things that are not only interesting but also useful.
So let's say you're kind of overwhelmed by the news or overloaded. How do you simplify it first so that you can pass on that knowledge?
How do I?
Yes.
Well, I use certain gimmicks, right? For example, during the pandemic, which hit us after we were born, it just kind of bam. It was one of the first things that happened along our timeline. we started looking into what is individual fatality rate, IFR. What does it mean? Is it applicable? And I provided certain rules for how to evaluate everything that everybody was doing, lockdowns, vaccines, all of that, and came up with 3 questions you should ask. Simple, right? A simple format. Is it A, do I need it? B, is it useful? And C, is it dangerous? And if the answer to any one of those 3 is no, then you don't need whatever that thing is. If it's not useful, forget it. If you don't need it, forget it. If it's harmful,
Mhm.
forget it.
Right.
And then, for example, we dug into data on sleep and vitamin D. We're on vitamin D about a year before the lay press figured it out.
Hmm.
And I was on taking a nap basically since I was a kid. And I think that's useful for your immunity. And so I gave them mnemonics: sunshine, salmon, and sleep. Go outside. The sun has certain attributes related to your immunity, clearly independent of vitamin D, with vitamin D. Salmon meaning foods high in vitamin D. Salmon was kind of symbolic, and sleep. So I gave them mnemonics. And for those who really wanted the biggest crayons of all and just wanted like one rule, I would say things like listen to the government, do the opposite. That's the only rule you need. Okay. So, but yeah, we deal with the nuances. I mean, the crowd that gathers it as loves it. They love knowledge. I give them quizzes, history quizzes. Throwback Thursday is a history quiz. So we draw lessons from history. Knowledge didn't start in 2020. It started before 2020. And there are things to learn. So back to your question about, do we help look at research and limitations of research? Yeah, we do. We've got a section called Wicked Wednesday, where from time to time we've looked at corruption in the medical publishing,
Hmm.
which is not a new phenomenon. It's been around, but I'm just looking at contemporary and old examples, as well as other things. We try to understand limitations, and once you understand the limitations of current knowledge, whether the trial design doesn't allow you to derive the answer that you want, or it's based on new knowledge, we try to triangulate it with old things. Like, for example, why is it that the ancient Romans had dementia and the ancient Greeks did not? There are things to learn in there. How did Milo of Croton become so strong? Right? That's ancient history. And then contemporary history, Joseph Pilates. What happened to that guy? What happened when the Brits imprisoned him? What happened in his prison ward that nobody got sick where he was? Interesting stories, fun stories.
Yes.
Everybody knows Pilates, but do people know what actually happened and the lessons that
No.
we can draw? I know they don't. They don't even know his
Don't.
first name was Joseph.
Right.
Okay. There was, a German of Greek descent who got locked up because the British thought he was a German spy. I mean,
Oh.
that's the guy who gave us Pilates. He's got a
Oh my
quirky,
goodness.
crazy story, but there are health inferences to track him down. So we draw from that. We draw from paleoanthropology. We just want knowledge. We go into this thinking, our glass is empty. Will you please fill it? Give me more.
Yeah. You said earlier, if the government recommends something, do the opposite. So is that like across the board, or are there certain things where we should be more careful?
Okay, so you're asking me to find an example where the government got something right. I think I could find a few examples.
Yeah.
Yeah, but has the government got it wrong? Geez, look at the dietary guidelines for America. You know
That's
that
one of my
story?
favorite topics. So yeah,
Okay.
let's talk about dietary guidelines. What's going on?
Do you know how it started? Do you know how we got them?
How did they start?
So in the 1970s, this Senator, George McGovern, somehow got in his head that the government needed to be in your pantry.
Mm.
So first of all, the dietary guidelines for America are the first time any government anywhere, as far as I know, stuck its fingers in the pantry, which until that day was the realm of mommy and grandma. They were ones figuring out what was in the pantry, right? What you're supposed to eat. Okay, so here comes the government. And McGovern famously said, people were like, well, hold on a second. We're about to do an experiment on the whole country, and we don't know that lots of pasta is going to make everybody healthy. It was like, I'm not a scientist. I'm a politician. I don't have time for that. Okay, so off we went. Okay, he rolled the dice. But the mechanics of how it happened, right? So McGovern's busy. He doesn't have time to look at the food science. He gives the job to a guy named Nick. That was his assistant. Literally, a guy named Nick. And Nick has a history as a journalist. Okay.
Okay.
So George says to Nick, figure it out, do something. So Nick's sitting there in his office, wherever in Washington, okay, as a journalist who happens to also be a vegetarian. Right. So you got a vegetarian journalist. I don't know if he was a vegetarian zealot. Some vegetarians are. There's a religious component to vegetarianism. And George McGovern's constituents come into Washington to see him. Now, George came from South Dakota. His constituents were cattle ranchers. So these guys would come in their boots, stick their boots on Nick's desk, get mud all over the desk, and Nick got more and more annoyed. And that is essentially how beef got to the top of the pyramid. That's how we got here.
From annoying Nick.
But this is how the pantry went from what it was to the dietary guidelines. And so that's an example of the government in action.
So is this when you're talking about how we were recommending 11 servings of grains a day for people and things like that, the pyramid?
Yeah, that's the pyramid. The 11 servings is an interesting number in itself. Different countries have different recommendations. One has 7, one has 3, or maybe 11. The point is that there's no science behind the particular number either. And my fundamental question is, why is that the government's business? All the more so when it didn't do us any good. But your question was, is there an example? I mean, my comment was, listen to the government, do the opposite if you want just one rule for health. Government got a lot wrong. And the food pyramid is an example of it.
Yeah. Do you think that recommendations, like there are industry influence making those recommendations, or cost for the food involved in them?
Or what for the food?
The cost. Like when you think of grains and things, like they're going to be cheaper than your meat products. Like, is there any incentive there to recommend those things over other things?
Well, it depends on who you're talking about, right? The
Yeah.
people who grow wheat are going to tell you to buy their product. I mean, that's just the way it goes. The question for us as members, look, there's corruption, there's confusion, there's stupidity, there's all kinds of problems in the information that we get. We recognize that. We are not here to fix it. We're not public advocates. We're not here to fix the FDA. I mean, that's not us, okay? So we're not here to save the Titanic. We're here to build a lifeboat. So it began literally as a text message about a recipe to a friend of mine. I mean, that's how it happened. Well, that turned into a conversation about food and food politics, and then the pandemic came along. But it was driven throughout by me and by my personal desire to thrive in an environment that I recognize as highly problematic. And my strategy for surviving is knowledge, knowing through various means. And I don't have any conflicts of interest in that sense. I don't work for Coca-Cola. Okay. I don't work for Harvard. There's no pressure on me. I mean, it's just, how do I see the world and how do I apply it to myself? And it turned out that people were hungry for that kind of credible source that, delivered credibility and integrity, right? I don't have conflicts of interest. So they gathered and I said, you know what? It's a lifeboat. There's room for you. Hop in.
Yeah, probably one of the most powerful things we can do is share knowledge and question things that don't make sense. And you're right, we're not going to save the world maybe, but we can save ourselves.
I'm all for somebody saving the world. Great. I applaud it. I can only do one thing. So I'm building a lifeboat. And if you want to know how I'm doing it, you're welcome. I mean, it's an open lifeboat.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to have you hold that thought. We're going to pause for a break from our sponsor. You're listening to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Coopersmith, and my guest today is Dr. Arnon Krongrad. Before the break, we were talking about knowledge and sharing that knowledge with others. And you mentioned you're developing a lifeboat to help people help themselves. And I think there's so much information out there, so much confusion, but you're really making it your life's work to kind of quiet that noise and just help people figure out what's going on.
That's true.
So during the break, we were talking about a few things, and I want to just talk a little more about nutrition because that's one of my favorite topics. And I said, I think people don't really understand what they're supposed to eat. And you said it's quite simple. So what did you mean by that?
So, first of all, some context. I'd like to put
Sure.
nutrition in the context of pillars of health. It's not enough to just
Mm,
eat right. Okay. If you want 3 rules for health,
yeah.
don't be fat, don't be sedentary, don't be sleepy. In other words, you got to eat right. You do have to get some kind of exercise and you better sleep. Okay.
Okay.
Um, our world would have us believe that nutrition is super complicated and you have zealots and ideologues on all the corners. You got the carnivores versus the vegans and everybody in
Mm,
between. And of course, you got the vegetarians who nobody knows what that is because that's a completely individual definition, as it turns out. Okay. I've drawn my inferences about optimal human nutrition
okay.
from a variety of sources. There's certainly plenty of modern studies. And I should clarify, I'm not talking about optimal nutrition for winning the marathon at the Olympics. That's sports performance. There's all kinds of strange things happening there with carbohydrates. I'll leave that aside. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about ordinary men and women who simply want to live forever and live well. So I draw inferences from modern studies, but I also draw inferences from the ancient world and the pre-modern world and so on. And here's what I think happened. We're descended from hominins that existed before Homo sapiens, um, Homo erectus for about 1 million years, and eventually became Homo sapiens. And what we know about their diet, okay, so the Homo erectus was absolute pure carnivore.
Mm,
And incidentally, while we're talking about the optimal diet of Homo sapiens, because I don't want to look only at paleontology, I want to look at us. Um, let me throw a quick quiz at you, okay? The stomach pH of the human is most like that of the vulture, zebra, leopard, or colobus monkey.
I would say the monkey, but I think you're going to tell me I'm wrong.
What does the colobus monkey eat?
Bananas.
It does. Yeah. If you give it
Okay.
a banana, they don't grow where it lives, but yeah, it would eat bananas. Sure. Yes, it would.
So a more of a vegetarian diet, though.
Purely.
Yeah.
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 It's a herbivore.
Okay.
Are humans herbivores?
Depends who you're talking to, but no, no,
Look around. Are we pure herbivores? Do we only eat apples?
no.
Right. Okay. So the answer, do you want to take another crack at it? You're down to zebra, leopard, and vulture.
Well, zebras eat mostly meat.
Zebras
Well,
eat meat. Zebras eat meat.
and plants.
Zebras eat meat. So zebras eat monkeys. What are you saying?
I'm showing my ignorance on animals here. Okay, so the leopard is going to eat meat. He'll eat the zebra.
Yep.
Okay, the vulture will eat anything.
It doesn't eat bananas.
Really? Okay, decaying flesh mostly.
Hmm?
He'll eat mostly decaying flesh then.
Yeah. It's a scavenger, basically. Yep.
Okay.
So you're down to zebra, leopard, and vulture.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to
So
say leopard.
not a bad guess. Not a bad guess. We're not far. The stomach pH of the human is not far from that of the leopard, but it is most like that of the vulture.
Okay.
So humans, if you go by the phylogeny of stomach acid, which is what we're talking about, humans are descended not from monkeys, but from vultures. Okay.
Hmm.
Implying that man was a scavenger, which, if you connect all that to, is man a bodybuilder or endurance runner, where I land clearly on the man is an endurance runner, not a bodybuilder, you can kind of construct a model in your head that says, okay, the animals, the lions, the leopards, killed whatever they killed, and then there was a carcass left over, and the man would have to run really far following the vulture trail to get to the carcass. And incidentally, women run as fast as men when it comes to ultra distances. So you begin to develop these models and inferences from ancient history. So let's come back to your question: what's the optimal diet? We're descended from an ultra carnivore, okay, the Homo erectus. We are most like that. Our stomach acid is most like that of the vulture, implying that we are built to handle rotting flesh, which is full of all kinds of things that would otherwise kill us. The strong stomach acid protect us from
Right.
that. Put those aside. Let's look more recently at the work that comes out of the Levant, so the Middle East, that area, and work that comes out of the Americas, all the way from Beringia, which is like the Bering Sea, Alaska, all the way down to Tierra del Fuego at the south. All those studies that I'm referring to show that man was a specialist hunter of megafauna. Megafauna would be things like elephants and mammoth, okay, and giant sloth, giant rhinos that used to live and lived on that almost exclusively. Okay, there's data on that. There's stuff from Montana that I read recently, all of it showing that. And the problem was man's technology, lesson in this one, okay, man's technology caused him a problem. And the problem in this case was the technology like spears, for example, made man so incredibly efficient at hunting megafauna that it caused their extinction. That appears to be what happened. So while man was off hunting for fat, brain, bone marrow, liver, meat, all that sort of thing, it wiped out the mega, which left them with the middle-sized, the gazelles, the cows, the buffaloes. As the megafauna retreated, man adapted by beginning to eat more plant-based stuff around 10,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, with the domestication of things like wheat, for example. Okay, is that optimal? No, it was Plan B. Okay, and the issue is we've now gone further and further away from where we were 50,000 years ago. We're now eating chicken and tilapia. Okay, itty tiny bitty pieces of meat as opposed to 5,000 pounds of it, right? So what's optimal? I don't think our biology has changed that much from 50,000 years ago. Our stomach acid continues to be as strong as that of the vultures. And if you look at modern day humans, there are plenty of examples of people who live on nothing but meat. So Maggie White, for example, a rancher in British Columbia, she's 86 years old, hasn't eaten a carrot since Eisenhower was president. Phenomenal condition. So man can absolutely thrive as a carnivore.
That's
You get
great.
pushback on that because I think the food industry, big sugar, big so on.
What about micronutrients, like the things we might find in those plant-based products, like beta carotene in a carrot?
All I can tell you is man thrives on meat alone, right? So Al Michaels, it's interesting you mentioned carrots. I saw an interview with Al Michaels. He hasn't eaten a carrot. He hasn't eaten a vegetable since he was 15. He's in his 70s now, okay? And the guy doing the interview asked him about a carrot. He goes, well, haven't you had a carrot? He goes, why would I? He goes, well, it's delicious. He goes, no, it's not. He says, how do you know? You never ate one. He goes, I can tell by looking at it. So, we fuss about micronutrients. The bottom line is, what's our biology? I'm not saying you can't eat carrots. I do. I eat carrots sometimes, right? I eat tomato sauce.
Have to.
At lunch. Yeah. So the question is, what's optimal? No, we don't have to. No, not at all.
So you had mentioned that man is an endurance runner.
I think so. I think so.
So on the optimal diet of carnivore, we can still achieve that type of activity, like instead of carb loading and all that.
Right. So we're shifting gears here, right? So the question that came up is, are we, when you look around in my world, you're more likely to see gym bros with big muscles than you're likely to see a Kenyan marathon runner. Okay. So if you look around in my world, you say, oh, man's a bodybuilder. But we're taking a broader view, and there's evidence from the fossil records going back to a skeleton called Turkana Boy, discovered on Lake Turkana in Kenya, all the way to the current era, suggesting that man absolutely is able to run forever, basically. I mean, look at the soccer match we just saw. Those guys are running and running and running and running. Imagine a gym bro trying to do that. No way.
No.
Right. So there's lots of examples there, too. We've got modern people who can run. One of my members runs 100 miles, gets up and runs 100 miles.
I have friends who do that. That's nuts. I choose not to do that.
But there are whole societies that do that. That's the point, right? The Apache outran the American cavalry, literally. Right? The cavalry would wake up in the morning and the Apache would be 100 miles away. So they couldn't find them. The Tarahumara in Mexico, the same thing. You've got examples like chief running antelope, like the fish runners of the Inca. And you have more modern examples where men make bets saying they can outrun a horse, and they do in endurance races. So there's plenty
Wow.
of evidence to show that man is an endurance runner. Now, the other question you asked was, can you do that on a low carb diet? Yeah, you can. And world records are falling by people who run on very low carb diets.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that is really fascinating. And that does kind of lead us into that athlete specific type of diet. But to bring it back to just your average person, how can people put themselves where they can get the knowledge they need to optimize their health and just keep learning?
Well, the world is full of offerings, right? Just go on the
Yeah.
internet and plug in your favorite.
Mm.
Well, you asked me where they can go. I'm saying they can go to the internet.
But should they?
Yeah, I think it's okay. It's okay. The risk there is, are you asking the right questions? Are you able to understand the limitations of the answer that you've gotten? I mean, there's certain red flags you can look for. For example, conflicts of interest. If somebody's out to sell you supplements or a drug or an ice bath or whatever, there's a commercial imperative in there that is likely to at least taint a little. Our offering is different. I don't have sponsors. I don't take advertising. I don't work for any of these companies. So we don't have any of those biases. You have the biases of a 67-year-old man who just publicly made a commitment. Yes, I did. On the 4th of July, I posted an event on Eventbrite to hike. It's the tricentennial hike. It's July 4th, 2076. I'm going to lead it. I'll be 117 years old. We're going to march out of Fort Ticonderoga to reprise the artillery movements of Henry Knox. It's a famous story from the Revolutionary War. That came about because I got sick and tired of all the people online saying, "Oh, do my stack, do my stack, do my stack." You know what? I'm not doing your stacks. You're confident? See you on the trail. Okay. So that's not posted on Eventbrite.
Okay.
It's free, and you can show up. Just bring a sweater because it gets cold. But our offerings, the more immediate, okay, before 2076, are simple. We have drops of wisdom, which are analyses of findings, science, history, whatever, that we publish as part of the inner circle. I think the classroom is not enough. I think one of the real limitations in trying to teach somebody is when you go on a computer, a PowerPoint presentation, a video. I think learning takes on a deeper sense when you experience. Okay, it does for me, and I think it does for a lot of people. So we have events. So, for example, in November, we're leading called Expedition 2026, 5 days in the Chihuahuan Desert, the land of the Tarahumara, 3 days backpacking, 2 days canoeing, Santa Elena Canyon on the Rio Grande. But it's to reinforce 3 foundational lessons about circadian biology. The darkest skies in the U.S. We'll talk about what electricity has done, but we'll experience darkness. Okay, we'll see the Milky Way. The sociology of running, which touches on some of the things we just talked about. So it's the land of the Tarahumara. We'll talk about how the Apache, Magnus, our ultra runner, will probably be there. And the third, which hit me as I was composing it, there's a set of experiments done in the 60s called Mouse Utopia, which looked at the effects of population density on societies. A bunch of mice were given everything you'd think they would need: food, shelter, protection from predators, all this, and just allowed to grow. And the colony did fine until it reached a specific density, and then all hell broke loose. Okay, the thing just collapsed socially. We could talk more about what happened, but the colony died. It went extinct. Now, I'm tempted to draw inferences to our situation. We're overloaded with social contacts, all the more so because we have telephones, with text messages, with so-called friends who we don't actually know, right? So the expedition, circadian biology, sociology of running, and an inversion of Mouse Utopia. There's only going to be 8 of us walking through the desert, and the question becomes, what happens when we don't have 500 friends texting us today? It's just me and 7 people walking.
That sounds nice.
It's phenomenal. It's
I love going
phenomenal.
places where I just don't get cell reception and just have to unplug.
It's phenomenal.
Yes.
This trip is, I can't wait.
I can't wait to read about that. We are almost out of time. So
Okay.
where can our listeners learn more about you and everything you're up to?
Easy, worldofez.com.
Wonderful.
World of as is easy as e.com. The events I listed are in the footer. You can just link from there.
Yes. And we'll put that on our show notes as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again for being here today.
Pleasure.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Do you have insights from the show? Send me an email at radiantpodcast2025@gmail.com. I'll be back next Saturday morning at 7:30 with more expert insights and practical strategies to help you live a radiant and healthy life. Until then, here's to your best life.